Hey guys, it's Rick Knockfee and welcome to Studio One 4.5. So not only is this one of the most exciting days for me because a lot of the features that we're going to show you today have been personal requests from Rick, but also from you, the user community, through answers.presonus.com. So this is the biggest free update that we've ever had for Studio One, and it features over 70 new features and workflow improvements. So sit back and relax and welcome to Studio One 4.5. Right. Wow. Studio One 4.5. We're here.
Yep.
So I've got some very, very special guests with me here today. This is probably a very familiar face, if not a familiar voice. This is Marcus Huskins, who's been a longtime friend and supporter. He's a producer, engineer, mixer based out of Toronto, and really happy to have you here.
Super happy to be here, man.
Yeah.
Super happy.
So Marcus was one of the editors of Studio One Expert blog originally, and then now it has his own technology blog called marcushuskinsmusic.com. And he probably knows more than anybody that I know about Studio One, so really happy to have. And
Happy
also,
to be here.
I want to introduce to you guys Gary Noble, who
Hey guys, how's it going?
yeah, great friend and supporter of Personas. So, you know, it's neat for me to be able to talk to Studio One users and be able to ask about how they use the product, but to be able to sit with a Studio One user who also has 19 Grammy nominations and 3 Grammy wins, and just to talk about how you use our product with what you're doing has been really cool.
Love it. It's an amazing product.
Yeah. So how long have you been using Studio One?
I would say maybe like 2 years. I'm a recent convert, thanks to your buddy Mark. He told me about it, and I started using it. And since version 4, I've been using it more and more, and I like it a lot. Like,
Awesome. So you've also been using 4.5 for the last.
yeah, and I really, really like 4.5. Like, it's become my go-to DAW. Like, I don't even want to look at anything else.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, obviously, with these guys here, we're going to be talking about a lot of the audio and editing type of improvements in Studio One 4.5, but also we've done a lot of, on the other side of the MIDI and virtual instruments side. So, in Germany, where we've got our sales executive, who's also an amazing producer engineer, Gregor Bayerl. I hope I pronounced that right.
Nobody can pronounce his last name, but we love him. Gregor B.
Great guy.
Gregor B. Gregor B.
Gregor B.
But I also like to call him. He's the MIDI Marcus. So he's the Marcus on the MIDI side. And so now we're going to turn it over to him. He's going to show you some of the new improvements in Studio One 4.5, specifically for MIDI and virtual instruments. So let's check it out.
Hi, I'm Gregor Bayerle. I'm a music producer and audio engineer based in Germany, and I'm sales executive for Presonus. And I'm very excited to show you some of the new MIDI features that we have in our brand new update Studio One version 4.5. Now, we've already had some exciting MIDI stuff in version 4.0, such as the note selection menu that was macro customizable, but we're really taking it a step further now. We have note fills and randomizations with tons of options that can be applied to your currently selected song scale, and it enables the instant creation of highly complex harmonic pattern that would have normally taken hours and hours to create. My favorite part about it is that all this is macro customizable. You can make your own note action presets and store them within our brand new macro toolbars. So with a little bit of customizing to your own personal needs, you suddenly have some of the most amazing MIDI features ever right at your disposal. Alright, so let me just take a moment to talk about the macro toolbar, which isn't exactly new to Studio One, but an integral part of the workflow that I'm about to show you. So you open the macro toolbar with this button over here, and as you can see, I have an array of commands here that are highly useful for the purpose of this view in which I'm currently in. So for example, I have a command called update channel names, which automatically syncs all my track names here to my channel names in case they ever got out of sync during my workflow. See? This has been called sync 1 before, this was called sync 2, and now it's exactly called like in the track. But before I get too much into the specifics, let me just talk a little bit about the purpose of this macro toolbar that you're seeing right now. It is a global macro toolbar, as the page name suggests, which means it is mainly supposed to be used in this arrangement view that I currently have opened. However, when I'm working on, say, a MIDI track, for instance, like this one, I see the exact same commands like I do up here. However, I have no use whatsoever in this situation for these commands. I don't need to delete any sections before or after these MIDI notes because the sections are relating to the arranger sections in my arranger track here. Also, commands like normalizing, adding audio track layers, aligning transients, all these things aren't really useful when I'm working with MIDI. So wouldn't it be nice if I had a completely independent set of commands for this view? Well, now we have. Did you see how I switched from the global page to the Note Actions page, but the top one stayed the same? This wasn't the case previously. But that is not all. I can also deactivate the grid here, and it stays active up here. And maybe you have noticed that the quantized grid setting is a different one than it is up here, and this is highly useful. Because when I'm working with MIDI in my arrangement view up here, I want to move them like blocks, right? And how often did it happen to you that you had a 1/16th grid setting here and it was just slightly off and it was a bit clunky, right, to get it in the exact same spot again? Well, this doesn't happen anymore because I now have the grid that's adequate for the global view, but here I have 1/16th, right, and I can make super fine adjustments in any direction that I have to go. Furthermore, I can lock my zoom state to the arrangement if I so desire. And if I go to an audio track, and I don't want this to happen, because I want to really zoom in much further than I would in my arrangement, this is also independently possible. Also, while it might be very useful to have the auto scroll selected for my MIDI, so I'm always in sync with where I'm at. Let me just go ahead and play a little bit of music here. Right? In this view, it's highly useful that the MIDI information is actually following the arrangement. But when I'm making like very small changes to my root node here, my root lead, I don't want it to move so much if I'm, for instance, doing some critical bend marker work. Also, by the way, wouldn't it be nice if I had a macro toolbar for the audio editor as well, that's specifically catering to my needs that I have in the audio editor? Well, for that purpose, let me just import a new page. Audio editing. This is a page that I custom made for my own audio needs. So for example, I can go to the next and previous transient. I can set bend markers if I so wish. I can make cuts if I so desire, and just generally work much faster in this view than ever before. So before I show you all the new node action in action, let me just talk about the new menus that we have and how we can maximize the potential of these with the help of the macro toolbar. So if you click on action up here, you will see that there's a bunch new entries, and I'm just going to go over these really quickly. Let's talk about fill with nodes first. Here we have 3 different choices. To fill the whole part with random nodes, that would mean the currently selected event part. To fill the whole loop range with nodes, that means wherever this bracket is set, that is where the nodes are being filled in for the respective event part. Or we can go for maximum precision and fill between our selected nodes here. Then we have to adjust the step length and specify that. So when I'm setting 1/16 here, what that means is in each of these little boxes of 1/16, there's going to be at least one random step, and it will also be 1/16 long in this case. If I also activate 1/8, it is entirely possible that there will be a step that's 1/8 node long. Then I can also choose to include dotted nodes and triplets, which makes for incredibly interesting rhythms sometimes. And I can also choose to only insert nodes into 3 steps, which is a highly useful thing if you want to work on bass lines and such. Then you can select a custom pitch range. You can use the pitch range of existing nodes, or you can use pitches of existing nodes only, which is very good if you're working with drums, for instance, where not every key is being assigned to a sample. Finally, we can not just set the velocity, but we can also choose to apply scale. And this is huge, because the scale that we're setting here is basically guaranteeing that every result we're having is a musical one. But as you can see, it would be highly clunky to go in this action menu every time to fill in the nodes, then hit OK. Ain't nobody got time for that, right? So what we can do is go into a macro organizer that's always been up here, click New, and just search the name of this menu that we just opened. It was Fill with Nodes. And these 3 little dots here tell us that we can actually double-click this command as soon as we have added it to the macro list. And then we can just choose the preset we want, and we just give it a name like preset A or something, or fill nodes preset A, hit OK. And once we've done that, we can just add a new button here, assign that to a command. I just set fill nodes preset A, and there it is. It would always be ready to go for us. So before I demonstrate how powerful these new node action menus actually are to create new complex MIDI pattern within an instant, there's 2 more menus that I want to put your attention to. The first one would be thin out nodes. So this is really important in conjunction with filling nodes, because as I've mentioned, filling nodes will fill every step available with randomized notes. But we wouldn't want that necessarily, because music is also about the rests and the pauses. So by following up the fill notes with a thin out notes command, which we can easily do in the macro, just add that command line underneath, we can quickly create amazingly musical results. The last menu that I want to show you is randomize notes. So after we filled everything with notes and thinned it out to have a musical result, we can now randomize the pitch a little bit if we're not happy with the fill that we've gotten. And we can do so by either applying the original pitch range or by using only the original pitches, which is very cool if you want to just shuffle, or for instance, when you're editing drums. This is fantastic. I'm going to give you a demonstration of this in just a little bit. Finally, as you can see, we also have the same randomization options for note length and velocity. So what I've done here is just make a couple of menus. We have also the option to just add separators and add as many commands as we like. We have infinite macros now, basically. And the most important ones I've also put to hotkeys. Before I start, I just want to point out that this bass line here is a multi-instrument of the BX Oberhausen from Brainworks and the Hive from Yu-He. And these are quite CPU hungry. I mean, they sound great, but they're very CPU hungry. And look at this effects chain. At the same time, I'm running my screen capture program on a computer that's pretty ancient already. So there was no way I could have done it previously. But thanks to the amazing improvement that we're seeing in multi-instrument processing, it's definitely possible now. All right, that's enough theory crafting for now. Let's get to it. So first of all, I'm gonna select the top notes and thin them out just a little bit. Gonna invert my selection so I have the lowest ones and do the same. Now I have a bit of space to fill here and there. Note that all the changes I'm doing here are also applied here because these are ghost copies. See how this sounds? Interesting. Let's just fill a couple more parts and then shuffle it around. Which is kind of a randomizing, but it only uses the existing pitch values. You can also, of course, randomize lengths. I'm gonna do this from a hotkey now. Same is true for velocity, of course. Alright, let's go to the chorus section. I'm using my iPad this time. One more thing that I wanted to talk about in this song is the improved Cartrack in Studio One version 4.5. What the Cartrack allows us to do is transpose any amount of tracks that we desire to the specified chord, and this can happen in a variety of ways. Now, what's important about this is that it's completely non-destructive, it can be reversed at all times, and that is, as I said, selective. So it is possible to exclude your drums and all the things that you don't want to transpose from the Cartrack. By the way, this has always been the case. It is also possible to do that with audio, which is quite remarkable. So this already very powerful Cartrack has gotten a nifty little update that makes it much more usable for me. And I'm gonna show it to you. So let's open up the Cartrack and work a little bit on the chord progression in our second chorus here. Now, randomization is amazing, as we have seen, but it is kind of stuck in the scale that we have specified. The Cartrack helps us to really break this chain and expand the possibilities of randomness towards infinity. Now, one issue I had when working with the Cartrack is that I wouldn't be able to immediately hear my result unless I press play and then stop again. Fortunately, our guys in Hamburg have found an amazing solution to this. So you have this little button here, audition chords, and it enables you to pre-listen any chord. What's amazing is that you can also use the instruments of your very own track here. So I can go to my pad and then pre-listen the chord track in context. This is super useful because now, without even starting the song, I know that this is gonna fit. Okay, so let's just put a couple of chords here. I mean, what goes well with C sharp minor, A major. Okay, let's go B major. Yeah, that's good enough. So let's see how that sounds. Without it, you can see that all the notes are snapping back to the original position. So now with. Yeah, that sounds really nice. So as you can see, auditioning chords is a very, very useful tool. Really accelerates the workflow when working with the Cartrack. Last but not least, I really want to talk about one more thing with note fills, and that is how amazing they are in conjunction with drums. Since the note fill menu also gives us the option to target only the existing pitches, this makes it perfect for any kind of drum fill. So for example, if I want to make a fill of the snare, the clap, and let's say this percussion sound here, all I have to do is just select them here and then go fill between beats 50%. So let's hear what this sounds like. Of course, I can also humanize that to give it some swing. Now let's listen to that without. It sounds pretty dull in comparison to me. As you can see, Studio One version 4.5 is going to open up whole new ways of MIDI editing. I hope that you take advantage of these new features and that you're going to enjoy them as much as I do. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.
All right. Wow. So Gregor B knocked it out of the park.
No, on Gregor B.
Definitely.
So one of the things that's so mind-blowing is just the power of what he showed with regards to the macro toolbar and the new implementation. I mean, that is such a ninja feature that saves so much time. You know,
and the Cartrack preview is really nice too.
Yeah.
Having that real-time feedback of what's happening in your song, being able to click the chord and hear it, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for those of you that are more interested in a lot of the audio and editing type of improvements that we've done in 4.5, now we're going to get to some of this. So I'm going to turn it over to Marcus and Gary, and let's talk about some of the new stuff in Studio One 4.5 for audio, just general audio improvements.
I think one of the biggest ones has got to be, if you receive a session done in Studio One from somebody else, maybe they have a 32, or maybe they have a Studio 192, or maybe they have a Quantum, or maybe they have the Apollo. You get a session, you're collaborating. The first thing that happens is you get an I/O configuration that doesn't make any sense to you.
Right.
So
it's their I/O.
It's their I/O.
Yeah.
And Studio One is smart, and it auto maps, the main outs at least, so you can get working. But one of the things that we've needed for a long time is the ability to be able to store, recall, import, export the I/O configurations, right? So now if we head into the I/O setup, you'll notice here we have some new features. So we have import. So check this out here. I've got some I/O configurations that I've set up. So I mean, in my studios, I've got a Quantum 2 as my mobile rig. I've also got an Apollo Twin Mark II. I've got a Quantum full size. And then I've got a big setup with a Quantum and a 4848. Those are a lot of different I/O configurations. So now, once I have a session and I've created one, I can just export this and save it. We have a new folder, I/O configurations. So as you would expect, we can import an I/O configuration, or we can export a current configuration. Or if this came to me and it was somebody else's I/O, if I've saved a default I/O configuration, so when you've saved default and that's your main rig that
Your
you're
main
working
rig,
with,
right.
we have the ability to just reset to default. So at any given point in time, we can reset to default, apply, and now this has created my default I/O setup. So a couple other changes here. We now have colors. I mean, this is kind of a simple thing, but it makes a difference when you want to separate your inputs and outputs. So we can assign colors. A big one is we have the ability to add multiple channels at once.
Yeah, I like that feature.
So instead of just adding add mono or add stereo, we can say like, okay, well, let's create our channel label. So I could say ADAT, and then I could select the channel format, and I could select the number of channels that I want, and I could select, for example, I could even select the channel count, click OK.
And the color too.
And now I've just created, it's auto-named them.
That's a great feature.
It's auto-colored them. So now if we click apply and OK, and we come to our inputs, now on our input side, I've just added all of those.
That's nice.
So while we're talking about this, check this out. This is a big change on the input side. See what we have here. So,
Oh, wow.
so you guys know with Studio One, you've always been able to put plugins on your inputs. So anything that you're recording, you could record through native plugins that have zero latency or third-party plugins that have zero latency. Not only can we do that now, but we can also do things like, for example, I can invert the polarity of a channel. So let's say snare top and snare bottom or something like that. If you don't have that invert phase on a preamp control, we can do this in the software domain.
That's so killer. So this is on every single input all the time.
Every single input all the time. And not only that, but we can also trim.
That's a really important one.
Yeah. So Gary, how would you use something like this as far as the trim control?
Well, like Marcus and I spoke about it earlier, if say you're running a pre or something, you run it in hot because you wanted a certain tone,
Yes.
now you can run it hot and then turn down the input here and still get that tone without overdriving the input to your interface.
So basically when you're setting up your gain structure,
Right.
you're not going to have these wildly different gain gain coming in to the DAW.
So you could saturate an ADL 600, get a nice crunchy tone, or an RC 500, or a Neve, or anything that you're using, and then just
Dial
say,
it back
all
a
right,
little
I need
bit.
to dial this back -10, and then I'm coming in with my peak at -15 or -12, which is whatever way that you want to work.
That's so cool.
So you no longer have to like overcook it and then bring it down with event gain.
And this is one of the biggest requested features, and one of many that we've added in this release, of just being able to have it on every input all the time. That's so cool.
And then not only, well, since they went ahead and did it on the inputs, not only do we see it on the inputs, but if we click our wrench icon in the console, so they've done some rearranging in terms of these categories, and they've split things up into 3 separate categories. But you'll also see that we have the option for input controls here as well.
Oh, so you have it in the actual
Mixer.
arrangement,
in
the mixer
actual
rather.
channel console. So if you're working with stereo
That's
tracks,
where I use it.
which in this case I am, we can flip the polarity of either one of these. We can adjust this, and this is happening in real time, but you don't have to render it.
Right.
So examples of this, again, kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, being able to, for example, flip the polarity on the bottom mic, but then maybe also
Trim it.
maybe I want to trim it, because maybe I want to trim this right down so that I can have my fader resolution up at 0, right? So you can
Give it a
play with
sweet
these
spot.
levels, and this is like pre-fader, pre-insert. So this is happening before you're hitting all of your plugins.
Killer.
Also really useful for virtual instruments. Every virtual instrument that I use, you hit a preset, and it's hitting like 0.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I used to put
It's
a
in the
mix
red
tool
immediately.
on, right?
Yes.
I used to put a mix tool on everything and pull it down.
that's what I used to do too, but now it's there. I don't have to do it anymore.
Now we have this. You pull it back, you trim that back. So
That's
this
amazing.
is a major improvement in terms of how you can workflow. And this is going to replace mix tool for a lot of people.
Right. Sure.
And then of course, if you render any audio tracks or instrument channels, this all gets maintained and it works as it's supposed to. But it's a huge time saver in terms of gain staging and stuff like that.
Awesome. Very cool.
while we're on the topic of major improvements, let's talk about something that I know a lot of mixers have been, speaking to you guys about specifically. When you're mixing, Gary, when you are in Pro Tools, what mode would you be using for tracking and building the start of your mix? Like in terms of your metering, your level metering and
that should
everything.
be a pre-fader, so you could see the levels on each track without being affected by the fader level.
So check this out. Now you right-click on any of these levels, and now you have pre-fader metering. So when we enable this pre-fader metering option, this works just as you would expect. So if I like to build my static I always build the full static against everything, but all the faders are going to start down.
Okay.
So if I play this now, you can see all my faders are down, but check this out. I have this level.
You see a little level.
Right.
This is the first track I want to bring up. Oh, and I see this has come in. Let me bring this in.
And then over here is another one,
here.
right?
Okay, so here's another element. So instead of me having to always look at
the
my screen
waveforms.
and the waveforms, or give myself, I used to put a VU meter on everything, and there's a VU meter, well, let me bring that channel up. Now, I don't have to do that. So whether I'm recording or whether I'm starting a mix, this is essential for getting your mix built and getting everything together, because the way that it used to work is if you soloed it cut off the meters for everything. Now we see everything.
That's awesome.
And then, of course, if you've got your mix built and you want to go back to post fader metering, we can disable pre fader metering, and then it works as
Just
it always
as you
has.
used to.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. So a huge option, and it's a massive improvement in terms of a lot of people haven't requested this feature that I spoke to. Mostly former Pro Tools users, heavy duty pros.
Yeah.
This is a feature that they were expecting to have.
Yep.
Another huge improvement that we have is, let's add, for example, well, here's another one right away. Now when you click the plus icon, it automatically has a search field in focus.
Oh.
Yeah, I noticed
So
that.
you no longer have to click the plus icon and then move your mouse and click. So now I can just type in and I can look for my compressor.
Right.
Check this out. Sidechain. We've always had sidechain button, but
Sure.
look what we can do now.
Oh.
We have a reverse
Right, you could do the
sidechain.
reverse.
So instead of me saying, oh, I want to pick the sidechain, and then coming to a track, like for example, coming to the bass track, choosing ascend, choosing the sidechains drop-down folder. When you have a lot of tracks, that can be really tedious. Now all
Right.
you have to do is you
Go
can
to the
select any
compressor.
track, and then I choose it. It automatically creates a sidechain send for me. If I need it to be pre-fader, I click pre-fader, right? So easy to do now.
So for those of the viewers that don't use sidechain, what give us an application of how would you use this?
Oh, sidechain is great for it. Like if you have a song that you're mixing and it has a huge bottom end, big kick, big bass, you can sidechain the bass, the kick to the bass, so that when the kick hits, you get the punch of the kick, but the bass is still there. Because usually they're fighting for the same space.
Just comes
so
out
now
for a second.
Yeah, just for a split second. So you get the impact of the kick, and then the bass continues doing
I
what it's
see,
doing.
I see.
And if you do it right, you don't even notice. It's imperceptible. You don't even notice it, but it works good. If you bypass it, all of a sudden it gets unruly.
They're fighting with each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
like a clash.
And then on the other side of the coin, there's the whole concept of being 100% intentional and
Yes,
having
yes.
that pumping,
Yes,
like
like
you have
EDM,
pads.
right? You do
EDM,
pads, and it's going yeah.
Yeah.
That's intentional.
But the real cool thing is, if you're using it in that context, like an EDM context or something like that, let's say that we have one compressor that we've set up to sidechain. Let's say that I wanted to sidechain all of these tracks. I can drag this over.
Ooh.
Check this out. Now, if we look at this, it has created the sidechain sends for all of the tracks, right?
Wow.
Right.
This is majorly useful, and it's set them to 0 dB, and it's all routed.
Ready
the only
to
thing
roll.
you need to do, if you
Only
want to
thing
make
you
a
need to do is
pre-fader,
pre-fader.
and
Yeah.
sometimes you need pre-fader, sometimes you don't. But
Right.
massive improvement that we see in terms of the way that you can do sidechains now.
Cool.
Another huge, huge improvement is the way that Studio One now deals with groups, right?
Yes.
This is potentially one of the biggest changes that we see in 4.5.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the way Studio One has always had intelligent groups. It's an intelligent DAW, so it would assume if I want to group these channels, I want to be able to edit them together, mix them together, solo, mute, and everything
Right.
like that. But there's cases where you need them to be separate. You want to be able to say, like, I want to edit these as one, but I need to mix them separately. And in that case, this is a great example. Let's say you're editing a podcast or something, but it can really apply to anything. You've got 3 different tracks. We want to create a new group. So I can give this a name. It automatically adapts like a smart name. Now we have this new option here where we can click this, and now we see our groups. So check this out. I right-click this, we now have group attributes.
Right.
So if you were mixing this podcast and you wanted to create an edit group, you wouldn't want anything else attached to it, right?
Right, just to edit, and then I still have individual control of the volume of the levels.
So that this application would be, let's say if the three guys on the podcast spoke at different levels, or maybe you had somebody that's really dynamic, you would want to have those faders independent, but when you're doing the edit, you'd want them to all be grouped in the edit window.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So, and it's worth pointing out that Studio One has always had really smart in fact, I stopped using groups when I used Studio One because if I multi-selected channels, they move together as one and the sends work and the plugins.
Yeah.
But that being said, now that we have these group options, if I have a mixed group set up only, I never have to worry about grouping those channels together.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So here's an example. We've set this group attribute to be editing. I make a selection across one channel. You'll notice that it no longer selects all three of them.
Right.
It will only select the one in terms of the actual track or channel select. But the editing is following. So I could do the group editing with these as whatever I need to do, and it's going to be an edit group. But then at any given point in time, I can mix things like that, right?
Yes.
And
So being able to decouple the editing with the mixing, that's huge.
Yeah, it is. It's huge. Yeah, that's a feature that I gravitated to immediately. Like, oh wow, I started using that one like right away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's very useful, right?
Right.
So another area where we see a huge improvement is just in the way, in general, we know that there's improvements with the way that Studio One is handling groups, but let's take a look at some other options. This is what I would consider to be a typical setup for a drum scenario. I have a kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, hats, my toms, my overheads, and my rooms. Let's talk about how would you approach this from making groups? What would your approach be if you were
Well, you would group the kicks together, the snares, the toms, the rooms, and the overheads.
That's exactly what I would do.
But then you need an overall drum group in addition to that.
Right. So check this out. We're going to create our groups here. By default, I think it's important to note that by default, the groups pretty much display the attributes that we've always been used to, but now the difference is we can decouple some of these things.
So if you don't,
Yeah, so, and the other thing is they're smart, they auto-adapt, so it's automatically giving us a name that's relevant. That's nice.
So
yeah, I like that. Because
so I'm going to create my groups. Maybe I'll just add toms for this. We'll create our overheads. See, this is perfect.
Right.
I'm
in a room.
And my rooms. So now we have all these groups.
So they're all kind of independent.
Yeah,
groups.
they're subgroups. So the idea is like, okay, here's my kick, here's my snare, here's my hi-hat, here's my toms, there's my overheads, and here's my rooms.
Okay.
But when working with groups, you need flexibility to be able to kind of say like, okay, well, that's great that it's a group, and 90% of the time I want it to move like that, but I need a moment to readjust the level between my kick in and my kick out.
Right.
So in that option, we have the ability now to suspend certain groups. So for example, click this. I've just suspended my kick group. Now I can edit these freely, and then I can reconnect them, right? And now it's editing as a group again.
Right.
At any given point in time, if and when I want to, I could now create a master drums group, and I would call this, in capital letters, drums. So now, if I have a drum group that's set up, then if I move one fader, then all of them are going to move together.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
Now it's worth mentioning though that we've always been able to do this with the VCA, and personally I will still continue to use the VCA because there's lots of flexibility with it. But for people who want to or need to work this way, it's really great to be able to do this. And of course, when we can disable a group, like I just disabled my drums for a second there because I want to readjust these. The other thing that's really useful is not only the ability to disable these individual groups, which can also be done by shortcuts, by the way. Shift-G, we can type in the number, and we can disable or enable our groups that way. And also by Alt or Option 1-2, we have the ability to activate these. But what's really useful for me, sometimes I'll have so many groups going, they have different attributes that I say, like, I need to just disable everything for a moment. We can do that. This option over here, suspend all groups.
And there's a quick key command.
There's a quick key command. I've mapped it out to be something different than what Studio One uses. I'm using the the Pro Tools, because that's what was engraved in my mind.
Understood.
17 years on Pro Tools.
Yeah. So, but I
Right.
mean, for me, just like, and this was my biggest gripe before with using groups is that I couldn't just suspend it. So I would create them and dissolve it. I would create it when I needed it for editing, and then I would instantly dissolve it.
Right.
And then I used VCAs, right?
And that's actually a really good point that you mentioned, is the fact that you remapped it. So, Studio One, just for those of you that are new to Studio One, comes with, of course, we have our own quick key shortcuts, but we also support other DAWs. So if you're used to Pro Tools or Cubase or Logic, we have those. But then what Marcus just said, that's you can use kind of a combination. You can create your own. So you can use some of the Studio One ones, some of the Pro Tools ones, and that's what he just did.
Yeah, so you just have to come into the Studio One menu, preferences, keyboard shortcuts, and now you can see I just typed in the keyword group. This is everything to do with group, right? So I have dissolve group, rename groups, group suspend, all these different options. And you can make this work for you. If something doesn't fit the way you want it, or you worked in another dial that had a different, I just changed that. I like to leave Studio One in its default, but that particular one,
You're just stuck in that
I'm just
muscle
stuck in
memory.
it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, same here.
now the other thing, like I said, we can still use our VCAs too. So I might actually very well not have this drum group at all, and I may dissolve my drum group, and then I may choose to go like this, and then a simple right click, and we can add a VCA for selected channels. And now it behaves as if though it's a group. And the benefit here is now I could automate any of these groups, and I could use the VCA. So just the ability,
Tons of flexibility.
And another one that Gary and I were talking about is, let's say that you have a big session. Okay, let's say we have a bunch of different channels. At any given point of time, let me hide this VCA for a moment. I could say I want to select all of these, and I'm going to make a group, and this will be like, let's call it band. And now the band group, I just want that to actually be a record group. I don't want it to be editing. I don't want it to be mixing.
Yeah, that's a great one.
And now what happens is that if I'm recording and I'm doing a live off the floor, and somebody says, okay, let's run another take. Boom.
One button,
Right, one
it
button.
record arms everything.
It record arms all of my tracks.
But these are all independent. There's no group as far as like editing. There's no favors.
it can be whatever you want. All you have to do is just simply right-click
Right,
any
you
of these,
choose
and
the
you choose the
attributes that-
attributes that
right.
you want.
That's so cool. So I tell you what I used to do to kind of, as a makeshift way, like when I'm doing a live recording, I will start with a folder track, and I'll throw everything in that folder track.
Just so you can have the record mark,
Just so
yeah.
I can have the record arm, and it'll arm all the tracks. But the only thing that's a bummer about that is that, when I'm starting to mix, I don't necessarily want a folder track with everything. I want a folder for my drums, a folder for my guitars, my vocals. So this is really cool because it allows me to have that one button record arm all tracks, but then I can still do folders separately. I can still do groups separately, for specific
what it comes down
applications.
to is it's no longer a workaround. It's like, hey, I want to, and that could be just for the drums. Maybe you're doing punch-ins. So on your drum group, you create a master drum group, and record and monitor is part of the group attributes. And then whenever you put one track in record mode, so if you just need to punch in the drums for a bridge section or something. So it's the flexibility,
Yes.
having all the options and decoupling a lot of these things that were completely joined before. It just gives you the flexibility to work the way you need to. Right?
That's what I like about
it
it.
comes down to
Flexibility is the ultimate flexibility. You choose how you want it to be configured. And then you just adapt it to your workflow. Instead of you adapting your workflow to the DAW, you adapt the DAW to your workflow, and that's it.
That's killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, right? That's what we want to do. We don't want to have to, we want something to adapt for us, right?
Yeah.
Let's hop back into this session, and I'm not sure if anybody's noticed, but I'm going to just zoom to a selection there. Actually, let's zoom in a little bit more. So have a look at that. Gary, you notice anything different?
Yeah, the waveforms look a lot better.
So check this out. We have this option in advanced. We have draw smooth waveforms. Take a look when I deselect this and click apply.
Oh
So you
yeah.
can see that, right?
Yep.
Let me check it off again. Click apply.
Oh,
and
yeah.
this really looks insane on a Retina
on a
screen or a
4K
4K monitor.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference, right? But it doesn't stop there. So that's the basic improvement. And then if I start zooming in, right? Check this out. Go a little bit further. Go here. Another step further.
Oh yeah.
Now we have what we're used to seeing
Right.
in other DAWs, which is when you're super zoomed in, that instead of seeing something which is technically accurate in terms of being blocked off samples, but people really want to see the smooth waveform and the way in which the audio is interpreted and drawn when you zoom into these points. There's a lot of people who've been requesting that, and when you start zooming in to these levels, now you see it, right?
Yeah.
While we're on that subject, when you're working at this level, it can be really useful to work at this level because it allows you to see your zero crossing points really well. So we were talking about this, and a zero crossing point is essentially the perfect point to make your edits in terms of your cuts. It's where the speaker cone is not going out or in. You're not catching it halfway.
No pops or clicks.
No pops or clicks.
Yeah.
You probably wish you would have had that when you were sampling like the Fujis and stuff and some of those records, right?
Yeah, you had to do it manually.
But another thing is we have a new mode in snapping. So check this out, snap to zero crossings. So now if you have your grid snapping on and I want it to work at this level, if I start making my adjustments, it's snapping to zero crossing
Right at
points,
the 0
right?
point.
Right at zero. And that's important for when you want to edit certain things, like if you're editing samples or you want to make edits. And the cool thing is, now that the editor and the arrangement, it's decoupled, I could open this up and, for example, I may not want to have zero crossing enabled in my main one, but maybe in my editor here, I think that would be a pretty good option, is to have snap to zero crossings enabled here. And then on this main screen, I don't think I'd ever be zoomed in that far, but on the editor, it would make sense.
And once again, like I said, it gives you the flexibility. You can set it up how you like to work. Some people might want it the opposite way. It all depends on what you're doing and how it works for you.
Yeah, and this is also a really cool thing. You know, the way that most people get around this thing is when you are, let's say I want to just take one kick drum to make a sample for impact or something like that. When I make that selection, in order to get rid of that little click, you used to have to put a little crossfade, right?
Yep.
Well, now you just snap to zero crossing and do your selection. It'll be perfect every time. No pops and clicks.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, you could still add it as a safety net if you wanted to, but now this is giving you the editing tools to kind of ensure that you're cutting on the proper points. Right? And also, you're getting the visual feedback on this waveform. When on a light color, this is really great representation of it. It's so easy for me to see things now in terms of my transients and everything like that, right?
Yes, it is.
While we're on the subject of all some of these miscellaneous improvements, a couple areas that I think are a huge benefit is in our formats. You might notice that we have some new options here.
Oh, yes.
So we have the ones that we're used to seeing, but in addition, if we choose MP3 file, we now have the option to choose variable bitrate. Personally, I usually use constant, but I know some people use variable bitrate. It's a dynamic thing that allows you to maximize just the quality and size factor of things. But what I'm more excited about is
M4A.
M4A support.
Ooh, that's a huge one.
I'll let you. It's all on you, Mark.
We were talking.
I got excited about that one for various reasons, but I'll let you tell it.
Well, I mean, the obvious one is just being able to export an AAC file, right?
Right.
It's a new format. You know, the codecs
Yes.
sound great.
Yeah, it
I've
does.
never used ALAC. I've never used that, but this one is completely lossless.
Right.
So that's really cool. I'm going to check that out. I haven't actually used it, but the idea here is that the quality is lossless, so the size remain, but there's like an encode decode thing. So
Kinda
ideally, it should be like a CD quality file that
Right.
with more like a MP3.
Kind of like an audio zip file.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So going back to the previous point, you know, the real benefit is this: is that, you know, you're on the subway or waiting for the bus, and you know everybody has one of these in their pockets now, and you know, how many times do you get great ideas when you're, you know, not near your DAW and you just want to sing them into your phone, you know, on a voice memo, for example? And if you're using, you know, an Apple iPhone, for example, all you have to do is basically, you know, email yourself or, you know, the file. Now you can drag it directly into Studio One without having to convert it to an MP3 or a WAV.
Great.
Yeah, that's a big one because every single idea, unless it's somebody that's working in a DAW, every single idea that I get sent
Is a phone.
is a voice memo
Yes.
from either an iPhone or, you know, a Samsung, an Android device or whatever. It's always this type of file. And my thing has always been having to go, okay, well, I gotta open up an external application like Isotope or something. But just being able, and it's such a simple thing, but just having the support
Yes.
to be able to import and export. So when you import it, it will automatically convert it to whatever your session is. Let's talk about a couple other things, though. I want to just drag in, there's this handsome guy.
Oh, look at that
over
handsome.
here.
Oh, my gosh.
Let's drag this in. And what do we have? Okay, well, this is...
It's a little iPhone video
Yeah. Let me...
of a terrible guitar player.
hug these guys for a
Really
moment.
cool guitar though.
Hey, how do you like my Saints guitar? Yeah, shout out to my bros at Schecter Guitars. The guys are Saints.
Yeah, that's a
fans.
really cool guitar.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So in this,
We're going to the
this
Super
was
Bowl
shot.
this year. I'm just telling you.
So this was shot on an iPhone. And sometimes I won't get a voice memo. Sometimes I'll get a video. And, well, we have here the video, the movie support. But not only that, I can extract this audio and boom, it's
Wha-bam.
instantly there. Right?
It is.
And then the great thing about this is, like I said, it's just created a cached file at whatever the sample rate is of my song, which is 2448, and it's a WAV file. So it's cached that, and we can immediately play back this audio that we have. But keep in mind, when you get sent files like this is often the starting point for your song. So Rick, I love you, buddy, but I'm going to hide you for a moment.
Okay.
Once you get this in, and my first step would be to actually, beat map this so that it makes sense, and then I would set it to how I need it to be. But keep in mind, at any point, we still have Studio One's awesome tools where we can start using the chord track, and I could start building this arrangement out right
Yep.
away, because it instantly becomes, the building blocks of your session. You're
That's
working,
right.
you're working from a voice memo file or a video that you're literally converting into your song, into your production,
That's
and
so
then you
cool.
start fleshing it out. You time align it. You bring in beats and
I'm
everything.
telling
like that.
you, every songwriter and producer that I've ever worked with is going to love this feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them put their ideas on the phones, and they're always trying to figure out ways to get it into the door so they can flesh out the production.
Sure.
It's going to be
But then the other thing,
Yeah.
Rick, is let's say I say, okay, well, Rick, I'm gonna do some mixing, and we can, I add an EQ and I make this sound nice and pretty, and maybe we add a reverb or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, oh man, I would love to hear what you're working with, and I say, yeah, sure, no problem. Well, I can now go to Song and export video, and
Whoa.
as you can imagine, this is the feature that a lot of people have been asking for.
This is a Gary Noble
This is a
feature.
Gary
yeah,
Noble
I
special.
requested this one. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And it's such a simple thing, which is like, okay, I've redone my audio. I need to stitch and attach that audio to my video,
Yes.
right?
And export it back out. So now you don't have to export the audio and open up some video program
Right,
like
external
Final Cut.
application. I had to
Stitch
it
stitch them
back.
back together.
Right.
Yeah, that was a.
And it's done really well. So, for example, most of the time you want to just use whatever the source codecs are.
Right.
That's
So
right.
I want, regardless of whether my Studio One song is 24, 48, 32, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I just say, like, whatever the source codecs are from the video file, just use those.
Yes.
But replace the audio, and it's going to attach Studio One's audio
New
to this
audio
video.
with your video. So I'm going to bring up a little point, and this is for any of you guys out there that are maybe using a digital mixer like a Studio Live Series 3 or any digital mixer. So, all of the digital mixers out there, when you're using them live these days, have the ability to multi-track record. And the interesting thing is now, we have these little 4K cameras in our pockets now. I mean, the video quality on a iPhone 10X or a Samsung Galaxy is so good now. But of course, you're on a gig and you're shooting, your gig. The video is pretty good, but the audio is still coming through this little crappy microphone. Well, my band, we multi-track record all the time. We can record straight to an SD card with the Studio Live 32. So now, check this out. All I have to do when I get back home is take my multi-track file on the song that I want, and I can import in my, iPhone movie, and now I can kind of basically, time align where the song starts, and I can mix multi-track audio, proper audio, with my video, and it's really awesome because I didn't have to do that much to do that.
Oh yeah, huge time saver. So one last area, which isn't really part of Studio One 4.5, but it's a real cool new product that you guys are also launching today, is, and Gary and I were talking about this morning over breakfast, is the audio batch converter. So this is something that you got. I'll let you introduce it, and we'll take a look at how it works.
So today is not only the launch of Studio One 4.5, which is a free update. We are also launching a brand new add-on for our online shop called the Audio Batch Converter. So this has been something that people have requested, and I'll let you do a quick demo of how this is useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an awesome tool for essentially when you need to have a bunch of files that you need to convert. We've got it open here. We can load it directly from the start page. You see we have this new icon here, Audio Batch Converter. Gary, you tell me all the time that you get sent files to be mixed and they're at 24, 44, 1 or whatever. Sometimes they're clipped, they're normalized to 0 dB.
Right.
You like to work everything when you mix 2496.
Right.
So for things like where he gets sent a folder of files where he needs to convert all of them at once, this is a tool for that. So for example, we can click add folder. I've got a folder, stems for converting. We'll choose this one over here. You can open them up, and then basically you have all these different processes. You have this process rack, and you can do things like, Gary, in the case where people are normalizing files to you to within an inch of your life, you could choose to normalize them to a new target level loudness.
Right.
You could, just do a static move where I always usually bring the gain down 10 dB of everything I get sent. Well, do it here.
Definitely.
Do it. Just batch convert it, right?
So if this
fade ins, fade outs, everything.
So this way I can leave the fader at 0 instead of bringing the faders all the way down and readjusting the gain structure and all that. Just have to get the fader back in the sweet spot. It's much easier.
So these things that you're doing are affecting everything that you just draw.
Yeah. So think of this as like a master fader. And then think of those as like individual files that are on channels, and I would be just exporting their exact range. So they've also built in some things like, for example, we have a declicker, remove DC offset, things like this. We have tools to extract a section, join files, merge mono files, split multi-channel file. So it's a really, really great general purpose batch converter. But for the purpose of what you're saying, maybe you want to, for example, let's take the gain of everything, and you would want to go like -5. And then I want to choose an output format. So this is going to be Wave 2496.
Right.
Stereo. I'll leave this as stereo. And then once you've dragged these files in, you've added them. It's just a matter of clicking the process button. And these are going to go ahead and fire off, and it's going to be processing according to whatever's sitting in that process rack. And I could have third-party plugins too, right?
Oh my gosh.
Right.
That's great. So you could apply a plugin directly to the file, all of these files, all at the same time.
So you were saying oh, that whole thing sounds good, but it's a little dark.
Right.
Then you could go in and choose something like, for example, I could have taken a Pro EQ and I could have said, right, well, let's just give it give it the happy face, and maybe we'll just put a little bit of a low cut on or something like that. I would stick to broad strokes, but things like that where you just need to fire through and process a bunch of files all at once. But the thing is, you can do as many. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do 5 files. It's like you could do thousands of files in one shot.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to point it out that if you notice while we're doing this, how quickly it's done. It's really fast too. It's not like, oh, let me go get lunch and come back. It's like it's done like.
And I don't have a smoking fast computer. I got a 2015 MacBook Pro.
Right. So if someone is running one of the newest laptops or one of the newest Mac Minis or whatever, this will be done in no time.
That's so cool. What I was going to say was also, a lot of times I'll get sent files from another DAW to mix, and it drives me crazy because I'll get like Ableton files and they all come over as stereo. Stereo files for like each kick drum and each snare drum and stuff like that. So that's another feature of the batch converter where I can just take all of that stuff and make them mono files, which is, for my workflow, that's what I like.
I can't wait to start bringing this into my workflow. I mean, I'm doing everything in Studio One now. If I needed to do that, I would drag them all into the arrange window, and then I would drag them right back out by changing my Studio One song format. But it's not. It's like a carpenter using a brick hammer.
That's right.
It'll get the job done, but it's not the right tool for the job.
Right.
This is the tool that I've needed. This is the tool I want.
So just to reiterate, the price of this batch converter is $49.
That's great.
Which is probably easily half the price of anything else that's available on the market. A real proper batch converter, and it's already integrated once you add it as an add-on. And basically the way that our add-ons operate is you download the add-on and drag it to the start page, and auto activates and installs for you.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, that pretty much wraps it up. I mean, I'm going to have a lot of content that's available, and I'm sure lots of the people that are doing Studio One content and lots of the partners out there are going to have a lot of information on 4.5. I plan to do some stuff, but I mean, this is, you know, the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to cover, and I think people are going to be really happy with
Yes.
the update and excited about it.
And we would definitely encourage you guys to check out the release notes and see all of the stuff. We could only cover a very small percentage
In
of what...
small amounts of detail.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
small amounts of detail of what is available to you.
Because I've been known to talk too much from time to time.
No, not you.
No, it's,
not you.
I know it's a
man.
surprise,
way.
but
No, I
I've heard
know.
it before.
I know, and I want to thank Gary and Marcus for being a part of this. Thanks to Gregor B.
Gregor B.
for
Gregor B.
for-
from now on, henceforth.
for knocking it out of the park for us.
Yeah.
And also thank you guys so much for taking the time to go to answers.presonus.com and give us your feedback of what you'd like to see. You know, obviously,
Because that's what this is based
Yeah,
on. This
this
is
is-
all feature requests
Yeah,
that
that's
I've
exactly
seen.
right.
You know,
Yes.
that's in the end of the day,
Yes.
right?
That's
it.
right. So you guys are the reasons that we do what we do. So we really appreciate it, and thank you so much to the Studio One user community and Presonus customers all over the world. And we'll see you next time. Enjoy Studio One 4.5. It's available right now in your user account. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
I'm ATB, Andre Tanneberger. I'm songwriter, producer, DJ, all in one. And that now since more than 25 years. I started in 1993, had my first record contract then. And yeah, I think one of the highlights was 9 p.m. in 1998 or 1997. It's a long time ago. Right now, of course, this was a #1 hit worldwide. I now did 10 studio albums. Working right now on the 11th. I never look back. I always want to create new stuff and want to show the people, okay, there's coming more, and it doesn't sound like the past. You know, I travel a lot still. It's not that often anymore than I did before, because you know I'm in a good situation that I can choose where I want to play. But there are a lot of festivals still in the US, in China, we've been in Australia. The good thing is I'm back in Germany this year for a lot of festivals. I will be on Nature One, Parukaville, and here around the corner in Bochum, Music Summer Bochum is again. So I'm always happy to be in Germany, but I'm also happy to travel all over the world. You know, I always get the question since 20 years, what do you think about trance? How's electronic music moving forward, or is it maybe the end in next year, whatever? And I always said electronic music always will develop. So I'm a big fan from, you know, not thinking about what is it handmade music, is it rock, is it electronic, whatever. It's always very interesting if you put all this stuff together and you get something new out of it. You know, in the end, the question is, what is electronic music? A lot of people thinking electronic music is just a computer is doing music. Electronic music is just the instruments. You use electronic instruments, and even if you listen to pop music or classic music, it will be done these days on modern computers. So it's electronic music as well. So it's just the input is different. Of course, when I'm playing a guitar, it's handmade music, but it's getting recorded by a computer, and in the end you put a lot of plugins on it, and then in the end it's electronic music as well. So the good thing for me as a producer and songwriter is that with this setup I can do a whole track. You know, I can play guitars, I can play the pianos, I can play the basses, I can play all the stuff for myself and put it together. I would tell the young Andre, do everything like you did, because even songs I did albums, when I listen to it today, I would say, I wouldn't do it again like this, but it was a part of the sound. And whenever I do it, I stand behind it. I never think about other music. I never want to copy other things, or this is trendy right now, I have to do it like this. I never do it like this. That's the reason why I always sound a little bit different, like all the other stuff which is there right now. But this is very important for me, to have your own signature sound, to have your own style. That's very important, especially these days where a lot of music sounds copied. I'm always happy when people come to me and say, it sounds different, but I heard it's you. There's something in it that makes it sound like ATB, and this is a compliment for me. So A long time I used Logic, but after the time I missed so many things. And there was one day I was at Music Store in Cologne, and they had just a version, a CD was there, and I was, what's that? Studio One Personas? Okay, I just tested, and immediately on this night I tested the version. I changed directly because I found so many things in this software which made my creativity bring it to another level. As we all know, sidechaining is so important these days, and so it's not just a typical the effect everybody knows. With sidechains you can do a lot of things. You can open up your tracks sound-wise, and so just in the new version we have now so amazing possibilities to get the sidechain on your track way more easy than in earlier times. You just can copy the sidechain things, and that's amazing. That makes it more easy. And on a place like this I can be, creative, and when it comes to music writing, when it comes to engineering, I can everything here on this place.